My mom died in 2019. Last week at 11:38 p.m. my landline rang. It didn't say unknown. It said private, as if someone had sanded the edges off a name and left the shape behind. I live in Ashford, Washington, pines stacked against sky, fog tucked in the ditches, a town that keeps its breathing quiet. My house is the kind that remembers everyone who's ever stood inside it. The floorboards keep score. The hallways keep secrets. The landline is older than me, heavy enough to bruise a kitchen drawer, coiled cord like a sleeping snake. It never rings. It rang anyway. I didn't say hello. I listened. Not static. Not the clean digital click of a robocall. Breathing. Close to the mic. Careful the way people are when they know you. And then a voice that knew how to be my mother. Honey, don't go downstairs. The sentence arrived wearing her shape. Not perfect, just close enough to walk into the room without asking permission. The part of me that wants to live sat perfectly still. The part of me that wants answers walked to the top of the stairs and stared into the dark anyway. From the front window I caught a slice of the porch. The light was on, a blunt, tired glow like it belonged to a different night. I hadn't turned it on. I hung up. My finger didn't remember doing it. The click echoed longer than it should, as if the phone had more room inside than a phone should have. I set the receiver on the counter, palm flat, feeling the heat the way you feel a forehead for fever. The kitchen went back to being a kitchen, a clock that loses a minute a week, a microwave that blinks 11:38 when the power hiccups, a bowl that still smells like garlic from last night. I waited for the room to be only a room again. It refused. I told myself it was a mistake. Wrong number, spoofed ID, a voice actor with a good ear and a worse conscience. I stood there and built a wall out of explanations brick by brick until the house felt smaller around me. Night 2. I didn't plan to answer. You make plans. The dark makes rules. 11:38 again, as if time had learned a bad habit. I picked up because my hand is faster than my certainty. The breathing was back, just off the mic, polite but present. There's a word my mom made me memorize when I was 5, a code to prove I was me if I ever got lost. I kept it in the same drawer as my middle name, only for emergencies. I pulled the drawer open with my teeth clenched. I didn't say the word. I waited. The voice said it for me. Perfect syllables placed where they belonged. But the breath didn't land where it should. It lagged, like thought catching its feet after the mouth had already left the ground. A millisecond of delay that made a canyon in my head. I told myself again, wrong number, good mimic, sick joke. The air around the receiver felt cooler when I stepped away, warmer when I leaned in. I hung up a second time with a hand that belonged to someone calmer than me. I slept badly, if standing at the window and counting the street lights is sleeping. The porch light stayed on until dawn, as if it wanted to memorize the house and needed a head start. Morning made ordinary noises. Coffee in the thin mug. Rinse, clink, steam. I told myself ordinary is proof. But ordinary doesn't return calls. Ordinary doesn't remember a word you only ever said to one person once, near a grocery store parking lot when you were small enough to fit under a countertop. I took the phone off the hook, set it on the table like a sleeping animal and watched it, the way you watch a door you don't trust to stay closed. The house hummed at a frequency you only hear when you're deciding whether to lie to yourself. Night 3. 11:38 arrived as if it lived here too. The ring felt closer, not louder, like the sound had learned the layout of the room. I answered because I wanted to prove something, and proof is a bad hunger. I said nothing. The voice came anyway. Honey, don't go downstairs. The way it held the last too careful, like stepping over a sleeping dog. My mom would have let it fall. This voice placed it on a shelf. What do you want? I asked, but quiet, like I didn't want the house to hear me bargaining in it. The voice didn't answer that question. Instead, it turned the porch into a mirror. You left the light on, it said. I hadn't. I looked anyway. The light was on, bright, as if the bulb remembered me better than I remembered flipping the switch. I thought about the porch boards under bare feet, summer lemons on the rail, the way cinnamon lived in the cut of my mother's recipe cards. My chest hurt like it had swallowed a photo and the corners were catching. I hung up without goodbye. The receiver clicked like a tongue against teeth. The air thinned. The kitchen stepped back into its body sentence by sentence until all that was left was the hum of the fridge and the microwave blinking. Eberthard like it had seen something and forgot how to move. Cleaned the counter that didn't need cleaning. Wiped the same circle until the fabric warmed under my hand. People do these things when they are trying not to go downstairs. People do these things when they are trying to measure a voice without a ruler. I told myself the same story again and again until it almost believed me. It's fine. It's a trick. It's nothing you need to keep. The story didn't fit in my mouth. It sat there, edge out, cutting. When the house finally cooled, I went to the porch and unscrewed the light bulb. The metal threads were warm, like a wrist after a held hand. I pocketed the bulb and stood there, palms open, as if proof might land in them like rain. Behind me, the phone breathed through the wall. I went to bed before midnight because ritual is armor. I faced the wall because facing the door felt like permission. I said the code word once, mouth closed, to see if it still lived where I left it. It did. The word tasted like copper and cinnamon and something that had been mine so long it no longer needed me to keep it. I slept finally. The porch slept with me, light bulb cooling in my pocket, the darkness practicing my shape. Morning knows how to talk you down. Coffee, faucet, the neighbor's truck complaining itself awake. I called the provider and put bureaucracy between me and the night. We don't show any activity on your line for 30 days, the woman said, vowels flat, keyboard clicks like distant rain. I wanted to borrow her voice and live there. If you're receiving spoofed calls, we recommend. I'm not, I said. I mean, I am, but I'm not. I thanked her because thanking people is free and hung up because time isn't. On my mobile, the call log was clean. No missed calls, no voicemails, no proof that a voice could know a word it shouldn't. My ears remembered anyway. Memory is a messy archivist. It keeps the wrong things at the front of the drawer. I decided to record the next one. I set the landline on the table and the recorder beside it, red light ready, microphone aimed like a superstition. I wrote the time on a sticky note, 11:38, because writing it makes it more real and somehow less. When night came, it came like a coin flipping. Heads, nothing. Tails, the same ring learning my name. I let it ring once, then pressed record. The breath arrived first, near, then nearer, as if the speaker leaned in when I did. The voice followed, wearing my mother's cadence like a coat from a thrift store. It fits if you don't move too much, honey. The vowel stretched half a measure longer than the real one ever did. On the spectrogram later, I'd watch it pull like taffy. The vowels tore just a little. Not broken, not obvious, just thin at the edges. I whispered the code word after it, barely. The recording caught both, mine and the echo that made the hair behind my ears lift. I asked a question that had a right answer. What did I bury in the yard in '03? Right of the maple. The blue car, it said, with the missing door. The right answer should have felt like relief. It felt like a hand that knew how to hold mine and squeeze too hard. Say my middle name. I didn't know why I asked for that. Maybe because my mother saved it for storms and report cards and the day I tried to cut my own bangs with kitchen scissors. It said it. Perfect, full, courtroom clear. My mom never said it like that. She wrapped it in the first name like a scold softened by love. The way the voice put it down, separate, polished, made me want to move out of my own mouth. On the waveform afterward, I zoomed in until the screen was a city of bars and alleys. Mine breathed before the word. The other breathed after. A tiny thing, a canyon. I told myself I was imagining it and then wrote breath wrong on the sticky note because writing is a kind of admission. I replayed the call 6 times. By the 5th, my kitchen sounded like a museum of one sound. The microwave blinked 11:38 even though it wasn't 11:38. It does that when the power flickers. The fridge hummed louder as if it hated being background. I turned it off and the house grew teeth. There's a thumbnail photo on the hallway shelf. Me, small, one eye squinting against light. The frame is cheap, too bright. I stared at it long enough to remember the day and long enough to doubt it. Did the sun fall left or right? Was the shirt red or faded orange? If the mind can edit color, why not voices? I needed a rule. Rules turned chaos into furniture, something to stub your toe on instead of drowning in. I wrote one on another sticky and stuck it to the phone like a bandage. Do not answer the second ring. I didn't know where the sentence came from. It felt like a thing my mother might have said between mouthfuls of Tuesday dinner when telemarketers used to find us. It also felt like a law written in a place that doesn't use ink. I tried to disprove myself because that's what you do when you're sane. I called my number from my mobile, let it ring twice, answered on the landline, listened to the delay between mouth and ear. The latency was human, messy, forgivable. The other delay, the one from the night, felt deliberate, like a person walking 3 steps behind you on a quiet street just to show they could. I put the recordings on my computer and watched the spectrogram turn sound into wallpaper. You can make anything look like art if you zoom in enough. I circled a place where the S in downstairs split into 2 faint snakes, one real, one a millisecond late. My mother's real S never split. She hissed when she was angry, but it was a whole sound. I wanted to throw the computer out the window and also never stop looking. Instead, I made tea and watched the steam make the air visible. If the house had breath, it would look like this. Warm in places, cold where it shouldn't be, persistent. I went to the porch and screwed the light bulb back in, just to see who was in charge. It glowed obediently, then dimmed like it had remembered something heavy. The wood under my feet felt like ribs. I closed my eyes and heard the mosquito hum of the transformer down the street. The way it sings when it rains, back inside. I opened the junk drawer, rubber bands tired of working, a screwdriver that's always almost the right size, recipe cards with my mother's handwriting, loops wide, ink faded where her wrist rested. One card reads, "If you feel far away, count the room." It should have been nonsense. It wasn't. I counted 4 chairs, 1 clock, 1 phone. I left space between each word like stepping stones across a creek. When I said phone, the object felt less like an appliance and more like an animal trying not to move while you look at it. I told myself the kindest lie I could think of. You're tired. I set the receiver gently on its cradle. The way you tuck a child in after they fall asleep on the couch, and turned off every light. The house went black by degrees. I stood there until the dark learned my outline and then put it back the way it found it. From the hallway, the mirror was a rectangle of night. I avoided it the way you avoid a person you love when you don't trust your face to behave. I went to bed and left the sticky note rule on the phone where the house could read it even if I forgot. At 11:30, I woke without knowing I had slept. The microwave blinked 11:38 again. Reflex, habit, omen, take your pick. The rule burned behind my eyes. Do not answer the second ring. It felt borrowed. It felt necessary. It felt like a sentence I'd been saying all my life and only just heard. I waited. The house waited with me. Night 4 didn't arrive. It assembled itself piece by piece until the hour wore the shape of 11:38. I sat with the phone already on the table, the recorder already armed, the rule already written in my throat. Do not answer the second ring. The first ring came from the left, as if the house had a mouth there. The second prepared itself on the right, a shadow of sound, a step you feel in the floor before you hear it. I lifted the receiver between rings, like sliding through a door that only opens if you catch it not looking. I spoke the code word first, too quiet for a stranger, exactly loud enough for something that had studied me. The voice repeated it perfectly a half beat late, as if it had to check a page before saying the next line. The late part wasn't a mistake. It was a habit, honey. It began, the vowel warm, the warmth borrowed. Don't go downstairs. The sentence had learned where to lean on the S this time. Practice. I pictured it in an empty room, moving my mouth with no mirror to tell it when to stop. I didn't ask why. I asked when. When did I get sick enough that you made me the code word? 5, it said, and paused in the wrong place. With the fever, true and not. The truth walked beside me. The timing wore someone else's shoes. I wanted to hear the rule from it, to know whether the law belonged to the house or to me. What should I do if it rings again? I asked. Silence lifted and settled like a bird on a fence. Then, don't answer the second ring. I tasted metal when I swallowed. Laws should come from people. This one came from a place. I took the receiver off my ear and set it on speaker. The voice on the table between us like a glass of water we were both pretending not to drink. Tell me the word you used when I lost my tooth on the porch, I said. Brave. Tell me the color of the toy car in the yard. Blue. Tell me why you keep calling me at 11:38. The breath stuttered. It reached for a shelf and knocked dust off a box it couldn't lift. Because that's when you'll hear me. I would have accepted a superstition. Instead, I got a mechanism. I ended the call and went to the doorbell camera because it saves whatever I'm too afraid to look at in real time. The clip was already waiting. Timestamp 11:38:07. The porch was empty. The wind pushed the doormat a fraction, and the chain on the hanging fern clicked against the hook like a small metronome. If you don't look for people, you can see breathing in the objects. I scrubbed the audio. The waveform looked like a quiet street. Underneath the quiet, 2 breaths walked in different shoes, one light and measured, one heavy like mine when I hold panic in my teeth. At 11:38:12, the porch light flared, then dimmed, then returned to its regular life. On the spectrogram, a thin thread appeared at 3.2 kHz, a S shape that wasn't there before the flare. 2 S sounds, stacked, one real, one late. The clip shouldn't have an S in it. No one spoke it. The porch did. I rewound the frame where the shadow bent without a body to own it. It bent the way heat does over asphalt, the way a thought does when it wants to become a word and can't find the door. I paused there until the image felt like a face I'd seen across a room and never met. Back in the kitchen, I wrote the rule again, larger: do not answer the second ring. I stuck it above the light switch. Another on the fridge, a third on the basement door. If rules are prayers, this was a rosary made of adhesive and ink. I said it under my breath. Don't answer the second ring. And the house said nothing back, which is the best you can hope for when you negotiate with walls. I sat in the stairwell halfway between floors, the place where sound shapes itself differently, where upstairs air meets downstairs gravity, and both pretend they don't know each other. I counted the risers with my thumb, 1 through 7, pause, 8 through 14. 14 is a number that holds both 7 and 2, and that means something if you decide it does. When the next ring came, it chose the stairwell with me. Not louder, closer. I watched my hand not reach for the phone. You can rehearse restraint the way you rehearse speech. I let the first ring finish its circle. The second ring prepared itself. A pressure change, a tilt in the room, a knot sound that pressed the air flat. I spoke before it could happen. Not this time. The knot sound passed like a car on a road behind a hill. I listened to the house. When it's quiet enough, you realize quiet is a sum, not a single number. There's the refrigerator hum. Off, I remembered, because I turned it off. The clock tick, late by a minute on purpose to stop myself from trusting it. The wiring whisper in the hallway, a high line that rises in winter. The space itself, rich with a tone no microphone quite loves. I told the kitchen what my mother used to tell me when I couldn't sleep. If you feel far away, count the room. 4 chairs. 1 clock. 1 phone, I said again, slower. The phone tried to become 2 phones. I heard the second ring ghost into the room and decide against being audible. I picked up the receiver after it didn't ring and put it to my ear the way you rest your head on your own shoulder. Why 11:38? I asked the empty line, then set the handset down and watched the recording write silence like a kind of handwriting. Later, when I played it back, I'd hear the house answering the question by not answering it, which in some languages is the same thing. The porch pulled at me. I went because I'm good at failing curiosity slowly. The bulb I'd removed the night before waited in my pocket, a warm constancy I'd preserved for no reason except proof. I screwed it in and watched it test its own glow, not the way a bulb does, but the way an eye blinks when it wakes to light. I crouched and pressed 2 fingers to the boards. They were warmer than the night. The heat wasn't weather, it was remembering. I could have pretended it was a trick of blood in my hands. I didn't. On the mat, a dead moth wore dust like frost. When the porch light brightened, the dust blinked. I blinked back. We both pretended to have learned something. Through the window, the mirror in the hall held a rectangle of dark and gave nothing back. I avoided walking in front of it, not because I believed in monsters, but because I believed in lag. I didn't want to see myself late. Inside, I put the phone in the center of the table and drew a small chalk circle around it. Ridiculous, I know, but borders matter to things that like to cross. I said the rule again and again, softer, until it was a mantra that wore the furniture thin. Don't answer the second ring. Don't answer the second ring. Don't answer the second ring. The recorder caught a sound then, a small tick, not from the phone, not from the house, a mouth moistening, the way you do before you speak a line you've practiced. I checked my lips with the back of my hand like it could tell me whether the noise had been mine. Dry. The tick still there on playback. I set my chair so I could see both the basement door and the hallway mirror without moving my head. Overwatch. The rule pin above the switch glowed in the bulb's leftover light as if it had learned its own neon. It looked like a sign in a diner that never closes. No checks, no returns, no second rings. When the phone wanted to, it nudged the air. I felt it in the way the flame on the candle by the sink leaned left without wind. "I know you're there," I said, which is a sentence people say when they want to feel like they made something true by pointing at it. The ring didn't come. Instead, the doorbell chimed once, soft as a mistake. The clip that saved was only 1 second long, a blur at the edge of the frame, not a person, not a bug, not light. On the spectrogram, the same 3.2 kilohertz thread, the late S, a signature or a stutter. It was writing itself into my machines. Back in the kitchen, I reset the recorder and sat with my hands flat where my mother used to set recipe cards to dry. I remembered cinnamon. I remembered porch breath. I remembered fever and the moment it broke, the way she sang without words. I told the empty room the story with the same rhythm to see if the room could keep up. The house followed half a second behind, the way a child will, the way an echo does if the canyon is tight. My story became a call and the silence became a response I didn't want. "Why did you teach me a rule if you knew I would break it?" I asked the table. The table had a water stain shaped like a map of a place I'd never go. The answer came later, in a format I would recognize too late: repetition. The house is a teacher. It only asks for what it has already shown. I practiced the move, hand to receiver after a ring that hadn't happened yet. Grip, lift, no answer. Set down, no answer. Breathe, no answer. The discipline felt like a prayer a person says not because they believe it, but because their bones do. When fatigue finally set a chair for me, I took it. The room grayed at the edges. The recorder's red light stayed patient. My head dipped, and I dreamed of the porch as a lung and the light as the place where it exhales. In the dream, the second ring was a step on stairs I hadn't built. I put my foot down anyway and felt the house lift me like a hand does a familiar weight. I woke with my cheek against the table and the receiver kissing my ear. I hadn't picked it up. "Honey," the voice said, too close, as if my ear were the microphone now. I didn't answer. I let it speak into a person who would not speak back. I set the receiver down outside the chalk circle and watched it like it might remember where the line was. It did. It rolled its cord and sat still, a sleeping animal again. The first ring came from the left. The second gathered its breath on the right. I stood and the floor told me in wood language that I was here. I didn't answer. The rule held. And still, from the drawer where my mother's index cards live, the faintest paper whisper slid into the room as if a card had turned itself. I walked to the drawer and opened it. On top of the stack, a new arrangement I didn't remember making. "If you feel far away, count the room." Underneath, in smaller script, letters I knew like the shape of my own hand. "If you hear me, hold the first ring in your mouth and let the second go by." My throat closed around the shape of it. The rule wasn't mine. It was hers, or the house had learned her hand. I closed the drawer and sat with the knowledge like a coin under my tongue. The next ring would come. The law was clear, and now that I had learned it in more than one language, the only thing left to do was fail it. Night 5 didn't need an invitation. It let itself in, climbed the stairs of the clock, and sat down at 11:38 like a regular. I had the rule written everywhere a person could look without trying. On the fridge, above the light switch, across the basement door, in my mouth. Do not answer the second ring. My bones understood it. My hands did not. The first ring moved through the room like a scout. The air changed shape. I counted to 1. The second ring gathered itself in the corner of my vision, a pressure more than a sound, and that was when I failed. I lifted the receiver after the second ring because fear shows up on time, and I didn't. I put the phone to my ear and heard nothing at first. The polite kind of nothing people use to tell you they're in charge. Then breathing. Mine measured itself against it and lost a beat. A voice slid into place with someone else's patience. You said I could stay. It was my voice. My cadence stripped of the heat that makes me forgivable. 5 words I do not remember saying, arranged exactly how I would have said them if I had meant them. The line waited as if the house wanted to see who I would be while hearing myself ask permission from myself. I didn't hang up. I set the phone on speaker and stepped back until the hallway mirror could hold both of us. The handset on the table, the person who had picked it up too late, and the version of me that had learned how to speak through wire. "Who are you talking to?" I asked. My throat made it sound like I had a cold. My voice on the table didn't. It repeated the question, the way an actor repeats a cue line when the partner misses their entrance. I lifted my left hand. The reflection lifted its right, then, late, its left, like it had to think through which body it was borrowing. The mouth on the glass opened a little too far for the small breath I took. I closed my lips. The reflection kept them open a fraction longer, then returned them to the correct shape as if the correction hurt. The porch light, which I had sworn off, treating like a character in this story, flickered in the edge of my vision. The house likes to move things when you look away. It is a magician's assistant that never gets to leave the box. Why did you say that? I asked the phone. Why would I say that? The receiver carried the habitation of my voice without the nerves that make it mine. Because you promised, my voice said, and the word promised arrived dressed for church. Polished until I could see myself in it and still not recognize the face. I walked to the kitchen and circled once for no reason except that the room had more corners than it needed just then. The chalk line I had drawn around the phone was still a circle, smudged where the cord had considered crossing. The handset stayed inside it like a trained animal pretending not to know what fences are for. There was a sound somewhere between the mouth and the throat on the line, the tiny wet click a person makes without thinking before they lie. The recording light warmed the recorder's plastic with a small, constant red insistence. I wanted to knock it off the table and also give it a medal. What do you want? I said, and made it a statement by forgetting the question mark. The breath on the line arrived in 3 steps. In, out, in, not mine. Not my mother's. Not quite human in its timing, the way a toy drum keeps the beat whether you dance or not. Don't go downstairs, said the voice that had been built to be my mother. The S's were cleaner now, trained, but the sentence leaned in the wrong places, the way a person might if they had learned English in a country with no one in it. You're not her, I said. I said it softly, and the room did not accept the softness. The walls returned it sharper, like a knife pushed back across a counter. You said I could stay, my other voice repeated, as if there were only 5 words in the world, and I had given them all away nights ago without noticing. I couldn't help looking at the basement door when it said stay. The The seam of light at the threshold was a thought someone hadn't finished. I tried the handle just to see if my hand would remember how to be ordinary. It did. The door stayed shut. I breathed in the smell that houses make when old wood refuses to say what it knows. I told myself to hang up. I told myself to put the receiver in the drawer with the recipe cards and let it learn how to be quiet in the dark. Instead, I kept the line alive and walked to the hallway mirror because some lessons require humiliation. The man in the glass watched me come closer. His pupils didn't bother to tighten when mine did. When I lifted my chin, he lifted his chin, then tilted it too far, like he wanted to see how much neck I had to give. I blinked. He blinked late. Then he smiled, just to see which one of us would look away first. I did. The voicemail light blinked while I stared at the frame of the mirror instead of my face. It blinked like a heartbeat that had been told to speak up. I let the line close by itself and tapped the message open with the kind of care you use when you touch a wound you know will hurt. 2 breaths. The first belonged to a person who thought they were me. The second belonged to something that could be patient for a century if that's what it took to finish a sentence. "I'm whole now," said the first voice, my voice without my history. The words fit like a suit tailored for the wrong body. The shoulders were too square. The hem hit at the wrong place on the leg. The confidence belonged to someone who had never tripped on a curb unless he meant to. "He's wearing you," said the second. If love can be a shape, this was the shape of a coat hung on a nail, familiar and wrong. If grief can be grammar, this sentence was what grief sounds like when it is trying to say itself clearly and doesn't have enough air. I played it again. Then again. On the fourth play, I could hear the click at the end as a small tongue against teeth. Not mine, not hers. A third mouth that had learned the trick of finishing a call in a way that would live inside the skull. My hands reminded me of their existence by refusing to stop shaking. I wanted water and didn't trust the sink. I filled a glass anyway and watched the surface for movement that wouldn't belong to the room. The kitchen held its breath long enough to be rude. I stood at the table and wrote the sentence "he's wearing you" on the back of an index card because words behave differently when they are pressed into paper. It looked wrong in my handwriting. It looked like something my mother would correct in the margins with a different pen, even though it was not a mistake. I put the card under the phone. A small private mine. If the receiver shifted, if the cord rolled, the paper would slide and I would hear it. I gave myself a reason to look away from the mirror and found my own eyes there anyway. The rule, printed in ink all over my house, narrowed to a point and pressed against me. Do not answer the second ring. I had done exactly that. The punishment, if there had to be one, would not arrive as a sound. It would likely arrive as a fact. The doorbell sent me its mercy without asking. A single chime. The clip it saved was 1 second long, the kind of length a person would choose if they were trying not to be caught. I watched it 4 times and saw nothing but the truth of an empty porch. I listened 4 times and heard a thin thread at the top of the range, a hiss that sounded like the letter S wearing a mask. I shut the laptop because I did not need another screen in the room, and because the screen had begun to look like a face that didn't blink. I turned the chair so I could see the basement door from the side, and the mirror from the other side, and the phone from above, as if altitude could make me safe. Why 11:38? Said to nobody in a voice quiet enough that the dog we don't have would not have heard it. The question lived in the air without growing roots. After a while, the quiet around it became a shape I could almost name. I thought of the porch and the light bulb with a memory. I thought of the old toy car in the yard, The blue one without the door. How sure the voice had been about the color. I thought about my middle name spoken like an attendance sheet. All of this could be evidence or symptoms depending on what I wanted to be true. In the hallway mirror, the man I try not to be looked like he had finally learned the lesson. He didn't move when I did. He waited for me to finish and then started, obedient, exact, a student who had been given the answers and wanted to show his work anyway. That was when I understood that failure here would not be dramatic. It would be slow. It would be patient. It would be the house learning me until I could no longer tell if it was learning or teaching. I swept the chalk circle off the table with my palm. Not because I don't believe in fences, but because I know who they're really for. The dust stuck to the skin the way flour does when you forget to dry your hands before touching the bag. I watched the phone sit there unbothered, like a docile animal that has already wandered through 3 open gates without anyone noticing. The basement door sighed a little the way wood does when temperature changes its mind. Not an invitation, not a threat, just a vocabulary word said out loud to remind the mouth it knows how. I stood in the hall and listened to the house list its sounds one by one, as if checking attendance. Wiring, glass, old nail. My name. I took a pen and wrote on a fresh card, the kind of sentence you write when you are both person and witness. If you feel far away, count the room. I read it once, then again. I put it by the mirror, just above the frame, so the man who looks like me would have to read it too. Then I did what you do when you are losing an argument to a place. I decided to practice. If the house wanted to wear me, it could at least learn how the fabric drapes. I stood in front of the mirror and said the code word the way a child says it to prove they belong to someone. Then I said it faster, then slower. Then I swallowed it without letting it out and felt it hum the bones behind my nose. The reflection lagged and then matched. The room took a breath I didn't take. The phone was quiet for a long time, not dead. I could feel its patience like a warm coin in a pocket you didn't know your coat had. The rule was still true even though I had broken it. Maybe especially because I had broken it. I closed my eyes and pictured the kitchen, the hallway, the porch, the yard. 4 chairs, 1 clock, 1 phone. I named each not because I thought language could save me, but because inventory is what people do when they want to be found later. When the light in the room shifted in a way I could not blame on the bulb, I opened my eyes. The mirror gave me back my face with a slight delay. The kind of lag you forgive on a bad video call because you want to finish the conversation. I forgave it. It did not thank me. On the table, the voicemail icon blinked again, even though I had not heard a ring. I pressed play and waited while silence did the talking. Then my voice, the neat one that cleans up after me, came on and said, "I didn't mean to wake up." There was a soft sound I cannot describe without using a word like peeling. Then the other voice, the one that wears my mother like a borrowed dress, said, "It's not about you." It never was. I stood there with the receiver still on the table, the rule taped everywhere, and understood that the next part wasn't going to be about obeying. It was going to be about training the room to know the difference between me and a thing that had learned how to pass for me. I straightened the index cards. I put the phone in the center of the wood and centered myself in the doorway where I could see the mirror and the basement door at the same time. I said the code word once out loud so the walls could practice. Then I said nothing at all and let the house try to answer without me. I decided to test the house, not the voice. Voices can be faked. Places have fewer excuses. I started with the oldest thing I had. the way my mother taught me to come back from far away. Count the room. I said the words out loud like stepping stones. 4 chairs, 1 clock, 1 phone. I walked the kitchen slowly until the floor began to remember my pace before my feet did. The wood greeted me in the same places, the way a dog lifts its head at the same hour every night, even when you change your schedule. Routine invites visitors. I set 3 index cards on the table. On the first, my name. On the second, the code word written small and slanted, the way a secret should look when it's honest. On the third, a single sentence, I am the one who decides. I read each card once, then twice, then again until the letters looked like furniture instead of meaning. The room listened the way a pond listens when you skip stones, not ignoring, not agreeing, only collecting ripples and keeping them. To keep from feeding it a rhythm, I changed mine. I breathed in 5s, then in 7s, then in a pattern I hadn't used since a childhood fever made numbers into talismans. I spoke the code word fast, then slow, then without sound, shaping it with mouth and tongue while the air stayed still. Nothing answered, and still I knew I wasn't alone. You don't need noise to feel watched. Sometimes the feeling arrives like pressure behind the eyes. The mirror in the hallway had started to act like a translator who wanted credit. When I raised my hand, the reflection waited a heartbeat before agreeing. So I gave it bad data. I lifted my left hand a quarter of the way, lowered it, lifted my right, blinked twice, smiled and unsmiled until the muscles in my cheeks stuttered. The man in the glass copied me, then corrected me, then settled into a version of me that was more confident than I deserved. It was like watching a student who had been given the answer key and was now learning how to show the work. I cooked because food is the most human thing I could imagine in a house that wanted to be me. Onions, garlic, the sound of water finding a boil. I opened the drawer with my mother's recipes and put 1 index card on the counter because it still smelled faintly like cinnamon. I read the line she wrote years ago. If you feel far away, count the room. I counted the kitchen again. 4 chairs, 1 clock, 1 phone. The phone pretended to be an object. The cord curled like a tail. When I spoke to the room, I said the wrong things on purpose. I told it I hated cinnamon. I told it the toy car we buried was green, not blue. I told it my middle name was something plain and wrong. Lies are poison to models. That was the theory. But when I checked the photo on the hallway shelf, the shirt I'd always remembered as red looked more like an orange I might have misnamed. It would be easy to claim the house changed it. It would be easier to admit I don't always remember what I swear I do. I tried silence next. An hour, then 2. I wrote sentences on cards and held them up to the mirror without saying them. The reflection read them a half-second late, lips catching on the C's the way a record catches on a scratch. I could feel the room taking notes. You can teach something by refusing to speak if you stay long enough. I put the phone on the table and traced another chalk circle around it, thinner this time, not to trap it, but to see if it understood boundaries. It remained where I'd placed it. The cord shifted a little, as if it had turned in its sleep. When I looked away, a scuff appeared at the edge of the circle, exactly where the handset would cross if it wanted to test me without being obvious. I wiped the chalk with the side of my hand and watched the smear gray my skin. In the afternoon, the porch light came on by itself and stayed honest through a stretch of cloud that should have made it unnecessary. I stood on the boards and put 2 fingers to the wood. Warm. Memory has a temperature. I unscrewed the bulb and brought it inside so the house could not use it to signal the world. The air dimmed without agreeing to be darker. I made a list of facts I refused to negotiate. I am Alex. My mother died in 2019. The code word is what it has always been. I kept the paper in my pocket and checked it every hour like a talisman that wears through touch. Each time the letters were where I left them. Each time the certainty that produced them had moved a fraction to the left. A test requires control. I set a metronome app on my phone and let the click mark seconds in the quiet. I clapped on the third beat. I snapped on the first. I whistled on the fifth. The room accepted the pattern, then reached for it. Cabinets ticked where they shouldn't. The radiator answered a half bar late. The wires in the wall sang as if they knew the tune and were learning where to breathe. I told the house a story about my mother that I've told no one. A summer night. Porch steps. The fever breaking without applause. Her humming a melody that had no words and didn't need them. I spoke it slow, every detail polished, every pause in the right place. Then I asked the air to say it back. It didn't. Later, when I checked the doorbell audio from a motion alert that should have been nothing, I heard a thin attempt at the melody under the insect hiss. The rhythm was perfect. The breath was late. I wanted to starve it. So I locked my jaw and let the day fold in on itself without giving the room anything new to learn. The refrigerator hum filled the space I refused to use. The clock counted with a limp. Dust wrote its small history on the table where my hand had been. Around sunset, the smell of cinnamon arrived without a source, mixed with the sweet metal breath of a light that hadn't been on. Memory does this. Houses, too. To confuse it, I changed my gait. I walked heel to toe in the kitchen, toe to heel in the hall, slowed my step on the fifth board that always complains. The house copied. After a while, the floor creaked before I stepped, as if my weight had already arrived and was waiting for me to catch up. In the mirror, my reflection's shoulders anticipated my decision to turn. I turned anyway and let the late version of me pretend it was original. I wrote the code word backward and held it in front of the glass. My reflection frowned like a student shamed by a trick. Then he smoothed his face and showed me a practiced patience I don't own. He read the word correctly anyway. The half-second lag had learned where to stand. I tried another poison. I told the house that the porch had 3 steps instead of 4. I said it out loud. I wrote it down. I counted them wrong on purpose. When I went outside and placed my foot expecting the ground, I didn't find it on the 3rd step. There were still 4. I felt foolish, relieved, and a little embarrassed to be grateful to a set of boards for keeping their number. I took every mirror in the house and turned them to face the wall. All but the one in the hallway. That one I couldn't move without believing I was losing the argument. I stood in front of it until I could feel the exact second my eyes wanted to blink. I refused. The man inside blinked anyway, late and proud of the delay. I blinked then. He smiled as if he'd won a small game we hadn't agreed to play. The phone rang without ringing. Not a sound. A shape in the air, the way a room leans when someone you love walks in, even if you don't hear the step. I checked the clock. 11:30, too early. It didn't matter. The feeling had decided the hour. The first ring would arrive when it chose. The second would look for me the way a question looks for a mouth. I took the receiver off the hook because I wanted it honest. A phone off the hook can still be loud if it wants to be. I set it in the center of the table and laid one index card beneath the cradle so I could hear it slide if anything shifted. I sat by the hallway where I could see the mirror and the basement door at the same time. I put my hands flat on the wood and let the house count my fingers. I spoke the code word once, quiet so it would have to lean in. Then I said my name as if I were introducing myself to the place I've always lived. The air held both like a breath it didn't know where to put. I took the list of facts from my pocket and read them again, slower. I am Alex. My mother died in 2019. The code word is what it has always been. The last sentence felt thinner this time, like a bridge with too many trucks on it. I read it again anyway. Bridges don't warn you politely when they're tired. I walked the house with the lights off to learn its other vocabulary. The scrim of the curtain against the window. The small pop a nail makes in old trim when the temperature changes its mind. Pipes thinking. A chair remembering a person who hasn't sat there in years. I paused at each and said aloud what it was, like labeling a specimen in a museum to keep it from being mistaken for something else. When I passed the bedroom, the smell of cinnamon thickened, braided with something warmer and older. I opened the closet. The air inside had that attic dryness that makes you swallow. On the top shelf, a box I hadn't seen in months sat a little too centered, as if someone who isn't good at pretending had tried to pretend it had always been there. I didn't open it. Control is saying no to a new door. Back in the kitchen, the index card under the phone had shifted a finger's width. Not far. Not enough to claim the room had moved it. Enough to know I hadn't. I lifted the receiver and placed the card back where I wanted it. I put the handset down with the care you use when you lower a sleeping child so you don't wake whatever keeps them still. The metronome clicked on my phone, steady and unbothered. I turned the volume down until I could just feel it. The room matched it. Cabinets ticked. The radiator took up the beat. The mirror timed my breathing for me. I realized suddenly that I had spent an entire day teaching the house the grammar of me and expecting it not to speak. I turned everything off. The metronome, the lights, even the idea of talking. I let the dark come the last inch on its own. In the quiet, the seconds kept going. A house like mine can't stop time any more than a person can, but it can learn to hold the moment where it tastes the most like you. At 11:36, the air pressed flat, as if a large body had sat down on the room. Not a sound. The sensation before a sound. The first ring getting ready somewhere just out of view. I gripped the edge of the table and pictured the rule written on every surface. Do not answer the second ring. I thought of my mother's card with that other, smaller line in her hand or the house's. If you hear me, hold the first ring in your mouth and let the second go by. I shaped the instruction in my throat and waited for the hour to dress itself in numbers. The house took a breath that did not belong to lungs. The mirror adjusted to a face I hadn't made yet. The phone, even off the hook, considered an old habit. I sat very still and let the next part arrive. I left the receiver off the hook so there'd be no excuse. A phone with its mouth open can't lie, I told myself. The lie arrived anyway, quiet and standing right next to me. At 11:34, the room leaned, as if someone had placed a coin under one leg of the house. The clock hands were steady. The seconds were not. My heartbeat found the table and tapped through the wood. The lamps gave off a tired warmth, a breath that belonged to a throat I couldn't see. I stayed in the chair by the hallway where I could watch the mirror and the basement door at the same time. I kept my hands flat like a student promising to be good. I rehearsed the rule inside my mouth without sound. Do not answer the second ring. The sentence tasted like metal from biting it too long. The first ring didn't happen. It arrived anyway. The air on my left cooled by a degree I could feel in my teeth. A shape crossed the room without moving. I recognized it the way you recognize someone in a dream who has the wrong face and the right name. My jaw locked on reflex the way you brace before impact. Then the almost ring on the right gathered itself and waited. The house held its breath. My name lived in the silence like a coin flicked and never landing. I spoke into the space the way you speak to a sleeping animal. Not this time. The pressure released without sound. Somewhere small inside the walls, something relaxed. The table didn't. It remembered my hands from when I was 5 and afraid of nothing. It remembered my mother's elbows and the way her laugh made the glasses on the shelf shake a little. That memory was not mine to feel. The room handed it to me anyway. I reached for the recorder and pressed play on last night's clip, thinking the noise would make the air behave. 2 breaths, mine and not mine. Then the voicemail I've been trying not to memorize. I'm whole now. He's wearing you. The click at the end landed soft as a tongue against teeth. The sound felt closer tonight, like the mouth that made it had learned where to stand. I turned the volume down until the room seemed to press its ear against the speaker. It wanted to learn the way I do when I am trying to be brave. I hit stop and let the quiet consider what it had heard. The doorbell camera sent me a notification without ringing. Motion. I cued the clip and saw wind moving things that don't mind being moved. On the audio track behind the small insect hiss and the transformer's thin whine, a third breath threaded itself between the other 2. I held the phone to my ear and counted. In, out, in. It didn't match me. It didn't match the voice built to be my mother. It matched the pace of someone in the next room, holding very still so that I would not hear them. I lowered the phone and faced the hallway mirror because I didn't trust myself not to. My reflection waited for me to make a decision so it could copy it. I kept my face quiet. He smiled anyway, a small private curve and then gone, like a secret rehearsed to look accidental. I went back to the table and spoke a sentence to the wood. If you are learning me, learn this wrong. I said the code word backward and then with a vowel swallowed. The house liked it. The lamp hum raised half a step. The refrigerator off seemed to remember the pitch of working. The wires sang so softly I could feel it in my teeth more than hear it. I took the list of facts out of my pocket and read them again, slower, as if slowness could anchor them. I am Alex. My mother died in 2019. The code word is what it has always been. When I reached the last line, I couldn't tell whether the doubt I felt belonged to me or to the room. The sentence stood on thinner ice than an hour ago. I heard water under it. A small sound came from the drawer with the index cards. Paper shifting, the way a book exhales when no one touches it. I opened the drawer and found the stack rearranged. On top, if you feel far away, count the room. Underneath, in the same slant that knows how to lean when a person is tired, if you hear me, hold the first ring in your mouth and let the second go by. I closed the drawer because there is a difference between reading a ghost and letting it read you. The porch light I had stolen from the night sat on the counter, unlit. The bulb carried a memory warmth that didn't belong to this hour. I put it to my cheek and thought of a forehead under my palm. Fever making time elastic. My mother humming no melody anyone else could use. The room caught the thought and set it back down in a different place. The bulb cooled. My cheek did not. I told the house a lie I wanted to be true. I said into the quiet, "You do not know my voice." The quiet said nothing in a way that suggested it did. At 11:36, the almost ring pressed closer. Not a sound, a posture, the way a question stands in a doorway waiting to be invited. I pictured the hallway mirror and the face in it learning how to blink like me. I pictured the basement door, the seam of shadow polite and thin. I pictured the recipe card with cinnamon pressed into the fibers by a wrist that used to rest there. The house collected my pictures and arranged them like frames on a wall that I would not admit was mine. The second almost ring approached without crossing. I felt it in the softest part of the ear, the inside where secrets go when you don't want them on your tongue. The rule sat up straight inside me. I swallowed and let the room swallow with me. The pressure passed. It left a taste. I took the receiver in my hand, not to answer, just to have something heavier than fear to hold. The cord coiled like a quiet thing that knows where it lives. The handset warmed to my palm with a familiarity it had not earned. I put it down gently, a gesture we reserve for children and weapons. The mirror in the hall sighed without glass. I stepped into it and lifted my right hand, then stopped halfway, then changed my mind. The reflection agreed with my original decision. When I frowned, he relaxed. When I softened my mouth, he let it harden. Then he synchronized. Then he fell behind again, just enough to make me feel like I was being followed by myself. I stood there long enough that the quiet began to taste like fatigue. A sound from the kitchen, the smallest plastic tap, sent me back to the table. The index card under the phone had moved the width of a fingernail. I stared at it as if staring could pin it. The edges of the room softened until the distance from me to the handset felt like weather. The doorbell camera pushed another clip. 1 second. Nothing to see, something to hear. The same thin hiss that draws a straight line across the top of the spectrogram. The late S, a signature that is not a letter. At the very end of the second, as the compression releases, a sound like a child deciding whether to cry. I closed the app and opened it again and replayed the second until it was longer than most minutes. I turned all the lights off at once so darkness wouldn't think it had been invited. The room complied like a body obeying its own nerve. The mirror became a rectangle pretending to be a door. The phone became a small shape with larger intentions. I said the code word into the dark without letting a breath carry it. The room said it back a half-second late. The floorboard near the sink answered with a low pop, the kind wood makes when it keeps a secret too long. I pictured the basement and did not move. The smell of cinnamon came at me from the hallway, braided with warm dust and the kind of electric breath lamps give off when they're thinking. Memory has hands. It touched my throat. I believed then that I could starve the thing. That if I kept my mouth shut and my hands still and my eyes on the places where I had set them, the house would grow bored and choose another person to learn. The belief lasted a whole breath and then broke because belief is a thin tool against something that knows how to be patient. I didn't hear the next part. I felt it. The phone, still off the hook, found a way to ring anyway. It rang in my ribs, a tight, clean pulse. It rang behind my left eye. It rang in the mirror, which blinked without me blinking. It rang at the doorbell, which lit without chime. It rang in the index cards, which shifted the weight of their ink. I held the first ring in my mouth and let the second pass, exactly as instructed. The room seemed pleased. The temperature changed by no degrees at all. The silence that followed had the shape of a verdict waiting to be read out loud. I thought of calling someone and could not think of a name. I tried to remember my middle name, the one the voice used with the teacher's punctuation, and felt it fall out of reach by a thumb's width. I told myself that forgetting is normal, that stress erases corners. The lie sounded good and slid down easy. I could feel it working, smooth as medicine. I walked to the hallway mirror one last time because I ran out of ways not to. The face that belongs to my life stood there, patient and prepared, and did everything I did at the same time for once. I lifted my hand and he lifted his. I smiled and he smiled. I breathed and he breathed. Then, when I turned my head a fraction to listen for a noise I knew wasn't there, he did not. He kept his eyes on me and waited for me to come back. I didn't move. He didn't either. Somewhere to my left, an index card slid a small distance. Somewhere to my right, a drawer considered opening. Behind me, the basement door remembered how to be a door. The first ring arrived again, so close it could have been the name inside my ear. I swallowed it like a pill. The second rose and stood at the threshold of being real. The rule held. The rule held. The rule held. The voicemail light blinked anyway.